in that's well, I'm going to get started. Welcome to our kickoff event for Solarize Central Montana. It is wonderful to see so many new and familiar faces this evening. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Clayton Dunlap and I'm the chair of Central Montana Resource Council, the Lewistown-based affiliate of Northern Plains Resource Council. CMRC is a local grassroots organization with over 120 members in 5 Central Montana counties. We were founded in 2013. CMRC is dedicated to sustaining the quality of our water, land, and food for this and future generations. We have an exciting evening ahead of us. Because we have so many folks on the call, please keep yourself muted unless you are speaking to the group so that we can avoid echoes. You can see what the mute button looks like on Bronya's screen. If there is a red strike through the mute button, that means you are indeed muted. We will start with some logistics for this evening and then an overview of our Solarize Central Montana campaign. From there, we will hear from Andrew Velena, Executive Director of the Montana Renewable Energy Association, about the trends in solar costs and technology over the years. From there, we'll get to learn more about USDA solar grants and loans from Ladd Barney, Business and Cooperative Programs Director at Montana's USDA office. After that, you'll get to learn about the selected installer for our Solarize Campaign, Bozeman Green Build, from President John Palm, who is the president of the company. Lastly, you'll get to hear from Carson Sweeney, General Manager of Fergus Electric, and Austin Mueller and Melody Masters, Generation and Transmission Interconnection Specialist from Northwestern Energy, about net metering and connecting to the grid. Finally, we will have at least a half an hour for Q&A, the most important part of every workshop. Because we have so many fantastic speakers, we're going to wait until after all of our speakers present to take questions so that we can keep the evening moving and keep on track. If you think of questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the chat and we will get to them at the very end. You can see what the chat icon looks like on the screen. If you are running into any trouble using that chat box, but have questions, don't worry. We will give you the opportunity to raise your hand during the question and answer section to ask a question, the old-fashioned way, huh? Now, for a very important part of the program, let's go over the assessments. If you'd like to go ahead and sign up for an assessment of your establishment, you can do so online at northernplains.org/solarize-central-MT. Check out the link on our Facebook page or reach out to Bronya after our webinar with your name, address, email, and phone number. We'll go over those a couple more times so you'll have it. Now, at this time, I'd like to pass the hat over to Lori Lauer, Vice Chairman of the Central Montana Resource Council, for a Solarize overview.
Hi, I'm Lori Lauer. I live outside of Lewistown on a small farm. And wow, what a great turnout. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. And while I'm giving you sort of the lowdown on what a Solarize program is, on the screen, you'll see a variety of solar installs that are already generating electricity right here in Central Montana. So Solarize programs are not new. For the last 10 years, they've taken the country by storm in big cities and small towns all across the US, including Billings, Glendive, Livingston, and Red Lodge here in Montana. A Solarize Campaign is a local effort that brings together groups of people interested in installing solar at their home, their ranch, or on a commercial building. The program streamlines the process of getting started with solar, helps you answer questions, and connects you with an experienced solar installation company that offers competitive pricing and quality work. If you live in Fergus, Judith Basin, Petroleum or Wheatland counties, and you own your own home, your own ranch, or a commercial building, you're eligible to participate. So here's how Solarize programs make it easy to go solar. Cost. We know that solar saves more money than it costs in the long term. There's never been a better time to go solar. And in fact, the price of rooftop solar has dropped 25% in the last 5 years. Tonight, you'll hear from the experts on cost trends, tax credits, grants, financing, grid tied and off-grid options. We'll talk about roof or ground mounts, and all of which influence the cost of your system. Solarize provides resources and information, as I said, to get your question answered and helps you set up practical next step to get started. And the program jumpstarts the process. A typical installation in today's world might have taken 2 years from the first time you inquired with someone to the time that the installation is finally made. With the Solarize program, most people who opt to move forward can have their solar installed in 6 to 12 months. So there are just three simple steps for the Solarize program. Step 1 is the solar installer company selection. So members of CMRC reached out to 40 different solar contractors and companies across the state of Montana, sent out a request for proposal, and rated applicants with a criteria that we created, and finally conducted extensive interviews. And as a result of that, we selected, as Clay had mentioned, Bozeman Greenfield as our official installer for the program. The company president, John Palm, is here tonight, and he will speak a little later to introduce himself and his company, their experience. So step 2 in the process are free solar assessments. When you sign up for a free solar assessment, Bozeman Greenfield will contact you to schedule a site visit. They'll talk to you about your objectives and your needs, measure your roof, its pitch, its exposure to south, any shading from trees nearby, or they'll check out a potential ground mount location for you. The company will be coming here to do multiple assessments at a time, and the assessments are planned to begin later this month. Number 3, the solar install. Your assessment will provide you with suggested system size, cost estimate, and a plan that's custom designed for your needs. And by the way, that's our install right there. My husband and I standing in front of it. So we've been through this. Once you decide to move forward, you'll work directly with Bozeman Greenfield to schedule your installation, which we expect to start this spring. So on a personal note, when we did our solar install 11 years ago, we sure wish we'd been able to take advantage of a Solarize program. It would have been so much easier. We spent a lot of time spinning our wheels, trying to find, at the time, there were only about 4 or 5 installers in the state, but just the process of interviewing and researching of who to work with. And really there was not much information. So we were kind of on our own. Solarize program really helps streamline that. So before I turn this back over to Clay, I want to repeat that there are 3 easy ways tonight to sign up, and there's one of them. You can go to the website, you can go to Central Montana Resource Council Facebook page, or you can just go in the chat and sign up. If none of those work for you, you can stay after this meeting, and Branya and another member will help you, will get you signed up. So thanks, and back to Clay to introduce our first speaker.
Oh, Clay, you're on mute.
There we go. Oh, I'm introducing my friend Andrew Velena's here. My bad. I've got to get off on mute, don't I? So he's been all over the world. He's worked for energy firm in Spain, conducting research and development on wind turbine technologies, as well as focusing his senior project on offshore wind farm designs. In 2011, he moved to Montana, where he completed 2 service terms with the AmeriCorps Energy Corps program in both Butte and Missoula. Andrew joined MREA as executive director in 2016, where he is responsible for developing and executing the organization's education, advocacy, and industry engagement programs. He graduated from the University of Rhode Island International Engineering Program with degrees in ocean engineering and Spanish, and is currently finishing up a master's degree in energy regulation and law from Vermont Law School. Andrew, we would love to have your comments.
Great, thanks so much. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak tonight and for joining us this evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure that you all can see my presentation. How does that look? Are we looking good? Can I get a thumbs up from the audience somewhere?
It's good.
Excellent. Look at all those thumbs. I love it. Great. Okay. So my job tonight is to walk you through the basics of kind of a solar 101 for homes and businesses. There are a lot of experts that were here tonight, including solar professionals, people from our energy providers who know all of the details about these things. So I'm just going to provide kind of the high level overview. And to get us started, what I always like to do, of course, is to introduce my organization, which is the Montana Renewable Energy Association. We're based in Missoula. We have 2 employees, so we're pretty small, but we work statewide to educate and advocate for renewable energy across the state. A little bit of terminology just to get everybody on the same page for the things that we're going to be talking about throughout the evening and as you go forward with your solar array. First and foremost, we need to differentiate between power and energy. Power is how much work something does, and energy is how much work something does over an amount of time. So it's that time factor that's important. And when we talk about these things, we normally talk about solar installations or any other kind of energy installation in terms of their capacity, which is how much power they could produce. So we'll measure in watts or kilowatts. And then we also talk about the energy that they actually produce or consume, which is watt hours or kilowatt hours. So kilowatts and kilowatt hours are the 2 terms that you'll hear the most. And it's the difference between how much something could produce versus how much it actually does produce. Just to give you a typical frame of reference or for how big these different energy systems can be, your typical rooftop solar system in Montana will be about 7 kilowatts, maybe 5 or 6 or up to about 10 is kind of your average size. The Judith Gap wind farm in Montana is about 135 megawatts. A megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts, so this is much, much bigger. And then Colstrip Unit 4, for scale of reference, is 740 megawatts, so even much, much bigger than the Judith Gap wind farm. So that just gives you a sense of scale. So if you want to calculate your energy, the interesting thing about the energy equations, which we're not going to get into, this isn't a physics lecture, but the interesting about the equations is that it works for both energy use and energy production. So you can measure how much energy something is using by multiplying the amount of power you're using over time. And similarly, you can do production by multiplying the amount of energy, the amount of power produced over an amount of time. So those are just some basic examples to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I promise that's the only math that I'll be presenting tonight. One of the questions that I get a lot, probably one of the questions I get the most at MREA is, does solar work in Montana? And the answer is absolutely. That's a hard yes. Now we do have longer summer days and shorter winter days. So the production varies throughout the year, but do we have a good solar resource? The answer is yes. Across the state, you can see here that it's rather uniform. So the picture here, the darker orange shows the areas of the state that get more production throughout the year. And if we compare that to a national scale, we're never going to produce as much energy as they do down in Arizona or New Mexico or Southern California, where they get tons and tons of sun all year. But we are comparable with our solar resource to other states that have very large solar markets. So places like Minnesota, places like Massachusetts, Washington, and Oregon, these are places with really large solar markets. A lot of people are installing solar. There's tons of jobs in solar there. And our solar resource is actually comparable, if not better, than some of those states. And that little graph at the bottom there, you can see that's something that was done for a study for Montana, comparing some Montana cities in blue compared to some of the other larger communities around the state. And again, we're not going to outpace Napa, California, or Phoenix, Arizona, but places like Hawaii or Seattle or Minneapolis, Minnesota, again, places with big markets, our solar resource can absolutely compete with theirs. Looks like I'm getting, oh, there we go. Sorry, I had a glitch on my screen. So the process of going solar, this is another question that we get a lot. There are kind of 6 basic steps, and obviously there's nuances to all of these, but where you are right now is kind of in this first step, this gathering information page. So things that we recommend looking at are, what are your energy goals? How much of your energy do you want to offset? Do you want to offset 100% or just 50%? Do you want to go completely on grid, or do you want to go completely off grid? Do you have a location in mind already on your property, either on a rooftop or ground mounted somewhere else on the property that gets a lot of sun? What's your budget? That's going to factor into how big of an installation you can go with. And the reason we always tell people to think about these questions first while you're brainstorming is because these are the questions that your solar professional is going to ask you. They're going to, sit you down at the table and say, okay, what are we looking at here? What do you want to do? And so having a sense of this will really help inform that conversation, but then it really will be a conversation. You'll be able to go back and forth with your solar professional, and they'll be able to understand kind of what you want to achieve and accomplish, and then be able to make recommendations based on that. So step 2 is contacting your local installer. As Lori talked about, they'll come out and do a site assessment. Clay talked about, they'll come out and do a site assessment and look at the area and see, if there's any shading concerns, or, where the best location might be, or if there's anything, if the roof pitch angles are, weird for whatever reason, they'll be able to look at everything and figure out what to do. Then you'll want to look at the costs and the financing options. So does the cost meet your budget? What are the tax credits and financing options that are available to you, which I'll introduce a little bit, but some of our other speakers will talk more about tonight. And we also have some information on our website that you can take home with you as well if you're interested. But there are options available there. So, do you want to pay completely out of pocket if you can, or do you need to consider other options? Once you move forward with that, you sign the contract, and then the installation kind of step begins. And this is going to depend, that the timeline of the installation is going to depend on a lot of things. First and foremost, there's some paperwork that you have to do. The representatives from Northwestern tonight, and I think from the co-op as well, are going to talk about the interconnection agreements. And those are really important because, you need to make sure that when you connect to the grid, you're doing so safely, and so that the utility kind of knows what's going on, right? So those are important. You also have to consider, weather, the solar professional and their installation crew, their schedule. You have to have inspections done and things like that. So there's a timeline there that you'll have to work through with your installer. And then eventually you get to just start producing your own energy, which of course is the fun part. Now, the great thing about being involved in a Solarize program is that steps 2 and 3 are pretty much taken out of the equation for you, which is great. So as Lori was talking about, they really streamline the process, which is why there's such a benefit to anybody who's participating. So that's why we, think Solarize programs are great. We're excited to see one happening in most and the surrounding areas. A couple notes on solar panels. These things are about kind of 5 feet by 3 feet-ish. Those are, there's some wiggle room there depending on the size and the capacity. Back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean only maybe 10, 15 years ago, and John Palm can certainly tell you more about this, but the same physical sized panel used to produce maybe 1/3 of the power. So the panels themselves for the same physical space are just producing much, much more than they used to. And you're getting, typically right now, I think what we're seeing is between 300 and 350 watts per panel, which is pretty good. And that means that your average system, again, just speaking in terms of averages, is probably going to need about maybe 10 or 12 panels-ish. But that could shrink, that could grow. It depends on a number of factors, which John will be able to work through with you all. Durability and warranties, I get these questions a lot, so I figured I'd just go over this really quickly. Your typical system is warranted for 20 to 25 years on average. That's normally actually based on the other equipment involved in the installation. The panels themselves continue producing really with limited reduction in production for much longer than that. And as far as durability, they're designed to withstand hail, snow, all of those things, and they're all factored into the design. I always like to tell the story. I drive to and from Helena quite a bit, and there is a little solar panel that powers a stoplight on the on the railroad track on the Little Blackfoot, and it has a bullet hole in it, and it is still producing and operating. So, these things are durable and can withstand a lot. Let's see, locating and siting your solar array. Again, this is something that your installer is going to go over with you, but one thing to think about, like I mentioned earlier, is whether you want to put it on the roof, put it on the ground. There are trade-offs there. For a ground-mounted array, you have the flexibility of putting it wherever there's good sun shining throughout the day. Make sure that you can maximize your production. The trade-off being that it does require a little bit extra, equipment. You have to mount it onto something, right? So there's a different racking system and support system there. The shading is going to be a concern, of course. Shading is a factor and will certainly impact production, so you'll need to be careful of that. And then the roof angle and roof support, again, all things that your installer will go over with you, but when they talk about siting, these are all kind of the different things that they mean. And, again, I mentioned over the course of a year, the sun's path obviously changes. And so typically if you have a fixed array, which means the panels can't change their angle to the sun throughout the year, then you kind of try to balance the difference between the two paths of the sun and get the most production out of it, which of course your solar professional is an expert in doing, because that's what they do all the time. And so if you look at that production throughout the year, you can see there certainly can be a drop off over the winter months, but you can see the real benefit of those long summer days that we get. You get so much more additional production. And this is an estimated output. There's no guarantees here, of course, but this is an estimated output using a tool called PV Watts, which is created by the National Renewable Energy Lab that lets you estimate a system's output based on different locations in the state. So I just plugged in a 7 kilowatt array, which is, like I said, about the average for Montana. And you can just kind of see this parabola shape, this kind of horseshoe shape, which is pretty typical. The cost of solar, I'm not going to give any price quotes. I avoid doing that. And I can't see John's face, but he's probably relieved right now. I think my installer friends don't like it when I give people price quotes, because then they get held to something. But what I can say is that the cost of solar has dropped significantly over the past several decades, and even more so since 2010. The Solar Energy Industries Association estimates that it's dropped about 70%. And what we're seeing right now in Montana is that before you take out any incentives or anything like that, your average system is costing about $10,000 to $15,000, and will pay for itself in about 10 to 15 years if you're participating in net metering, which I'll talk about in a second. But 10 to 15 year payback is pretty good. The golden egg, the goal for most systems is about 10 years. If you get under 10, that's supposed to be like phenomenal. So anything in that range is pretty good. And to be honest, from some analyses that I'm seeing, it actually beats the stock market. So as far as investments go, it can certainly be worth it for you. Financing and incentives, there are financing and incentives out there. There's a loan option from the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. There's a loan option from Clearwater Credit Union. For those, I don't know if anyone on this call would be, for those closer to Helena proper, there are some loan options there too. I won't talk about the Rural Energy for America program, the USDA program. LAD's going to do that, which is great. And there's also a new option in Montana called Commercial Property Assessed Capital Enhancements, or in other places, Property Assessed Clean Energy. And through those programs, you can essentially pay back the cost of the system through property tax assessments that happen twice a year. That has been enabled in Montana, but city and county governments still have to enable it locally. So there's more information and work that needs to happen there. But just to let you know, there are options out there that are good options for you and worth exploring if those are needed. One of the ones that's really important and really helpful for people is the federal investment tax credit. This is a income tax credit that you can take that can get up to 26% of the total cost lopped right off of the top. So you do have to have enough of a tax burden to cover that cost. So if you don't owe taxes, this won't be an option for you. And I mention that because, if you're on fixed income or if you're retired, that might factor into your decision. So it's important to look into that. Or if you just happen to have a low tax liability, that will factor into it as well. This is where I say that I'm not a tax professional and I'm not a lawyer either. It's just so, you should always check with those professionals to figure out how this is going to impact you. But if you can take this tax credit, it's a really big deal and makes a really big impact. And then lastly, I just want to talk about net metering. So net metering on the highest level is a very simple kind of process. And what net metering is it's a billing mechanism that allows anyone with a generation system at their home or business to export any energy that they're producing and not using. So any excess energy, they can export that out onto the grid and they get a credit on their bill for that energy. So if you are at home and your panels are producing, but you're using a bunch of appliances in your home and the amount of energy you need is higher than the amount of energy you're producing, then your home is still going to continue to pull energy from the grid and you're just going to pay for it like you normally would. But if your panels are producing more, say you're not using as many appliances, say you're away, in the middle of the day and your solar panels are just producing, that excess energy can flow out to the grid and you get a credit. I'm not going to get into the details of net metering and the different rates and values because it varies from energy provider to energy provider. So, Northwestern and the co-ops, they all have different setups, but it's important to look into because the value of those credits can impact how much you're saving, obviously. So it's an important issue to look into, especially when you're looking at installing your own system. I threw up here just a quick financial model just to kind of show you a little bit about what you could save. Again, this is based on a range of prices and a range of costs, but just to give you a different mentality of thinking about this, if you're looking at your total cost for a 7 kilowatt system, maybe $17,000 to $21,000, you get to use the federal investment tax credit that I talked about. So maybe you get to cut that down to $13,000 to $15,500, and then through net metering, you get to save energy both through net metering and just through reducing your energy usage, right? For paying for your own energy. And so your savings through the warranty can be about $26,000 in this example. So that's a payback time of about 12 to 15 years. But then after the system is paid off, importantly, of course, it's going to continue to producing energy and you just get to bank that money effectively. So this is just a quick snapshot of the financial model. Once you get the actual details of your costs and your energy cost and the cost of the system, you can do a more detailed analysis yourself, of course. And that's it. I think I'm right around time. Just a quick plug for MREA's Learn section of our website. If you haven't been there before, a lot of the things I talked about today, including net metering, how to go solar, financing and incentives, all of those things are right on our website. And we'd be very happy if you were interested in visiting and finding out more information. So I think with that, I will mute myself and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Andrew, I've heard you about 5 times now, and every time I learn more. Just a wealth of information available there. Thank you again, my friend. Now, I want to remind everybody one more time, wait until after all our speakers present to take your questions so that we can keep the evening moving along and on track. If you think of questions throughout the presentations, write them down in the chat. And if you don't know how to use the chat, then just jot them down, and we'll do the old-fashioned way by hand raising at the end. We've got plenty of time for questions for Andrew and any of our other speakers at the end of the program. Now I'd like to present Ladd Barney. Ladd currently serves as the Montana Business and Cooperative Programs Director for USDA Rural Development. Prior, he served as Area Director for Rural Development, Missoula and Kalispell in the late 2000s. Ladd has also worked as the Director of Small Business Development Center at the Kalispell Chamber of Commerce for 5 years. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Ladd was Operations Manager and Lead Sales Consultant for 2 technology solution providers, one in Kalispell and one in Vancouver, Washington. In addition to starting a technology-based Montana business immediately after degrees from the University of Montana. Ladd is married to wife Kristen and has 3 children. And so now I'd like to turn this over to Ladd to talk about financing. Ladd, you're on.
Wow, look at that picture. That was quite a while ago. That was actually pre-COVID. That's my pre-COVID picture. I look a little different now. Thank you very much, Clay. I appreciate the invite, and Lori, thanks for including USDA in your rollout in this effort. Thank you and congratulate you on your rollout today, and happy to be a part of it. I have a short amount of time today. I just want to introduce myself and my program real quick, and then maybe drill down into some details during the Q&A portion. But with my short amount of time today, I'll just really hit some highlights of how our program works. As Clay introduced, I manage the business programs here in Montana for USDA Rural Development, which includes about a dozen different programs, one of which is that Rural Energy for America program. And that program really kind of works in one of 2 ways. It funds solar projects. It can fund other energy related projects, energy efficiency or other renewable energy systems. But in this particular case, you're interested in the solar side. But it can fund solar projects in the form of a grant or in the form of a guaranteed loan. So guaranteed loan is something that you can get through your commercial lender. Lender applies on your behalf to the USDA's program, and then you go through their process just like you would for any commercial loan. On the grant side, that's a different process. You apply directly to the USDA, and then the USDA will process your application, and if competitive, make an award available to you. And then once your project's done, we can reimburse your project costs for up to 25% of those eligible costs. So those the two different ways that USDA can work in funding renewable energy systems. A really big eligibility criteria for our program is that our projects have to be for small business use only. Small business, including for-profit, business operations in rural community in Montana, which could include a farm and ranch operation. Rural being defined as really anywhere here in Montana outside of Missoula, Great Falls, and Billings. So essentially almost the entire state, certainly where we have the predominant participants tonight. Fergus County is all rural based on our definition. So I think I just want to reiterate a little bit of the process that Andrew introduced and kind of make a recommendation for everybody that the best way to tap into this loan and grant program is through this group that is gathered today, the Central Montana Resource Council. I mean, laying all that out for you, introducing that and making those steps available for you it really takes off a lot of headache in not just evaluating the system, but also evaluating the financing which is available. And if you're a small business owner, that's a really great way to start that process in evaluating the USDA program. The assessment is key, right, to making a decision on that. The information from the assessment will be a very important criteria and information to include in your application to us. And if you're working with a vendor like John Palm, he can line out, he's worked on so many of our projects, and we're happy to do so. And he understands where all the dead bodies are at and all the landmines to kind of navigate around, especially with the USDA's bureaucratic process. And so you're really in a great spot to start and end with a solar project for your small business operation. With the professionals that Clay and Lori have pulled together for you. So again, when you think of USDA's Rural Energy for America program, keep in mind that it's for small businesses only, which can include an agriculture producer operation. It is a 25% reimbursable grant for your project if you're approved, or it can be a guarantee loan that you can get from your commercial lender to finance that project. And what I'd like to do is just really quickly before I sign off is just show a picture of a very simple map. So Branya, if you can give me a thumbs up that you see that. Awesome. Okay. So the only reason why I show this to you is just to show you that this is not a new program. This is a very mature program. The numbers that you see in the map that you see here is 122 different small business projects for $2.3 million worth of grants awarded in the last 4 years. And then you can see the counties that are reverse highlighted there in Montana for where those projects have been installed. So most of them were from really Lewistown and West. Certainly in Ferguson County, but Lewistown and West has used this program predominantly, at least the grant program. And we're out here today on the east side. I'm in Miles City today. Yesterday I was in Glendive. To hopefully kind of stretch that program delivery to the eastern part of the state. But in the meantime, we'd love to see some projects coming from the Fergus County and Central Montana Resource Council service area. I just would leave you with that and hope to entertain and be around for questions later on this evening. So thanks a lot. Turn it back to you, Clay.
Thank you, lad. Great information there. John Palm is the founder of the Bozeman Green Build. He's been working in the renewable energy industry in Montana for over 30 years. John's first interaction with sun-powered electrical generation was installing a standalone solar PV system at a remote off-grid cabin in the Madison Valley. After the adoption of Montana's grid-tied net metering standards in 1999, John started to install net metered PV systems at the homes he was building. As its focus turned to energy efficient building practices, solar PV and solar thermal systems played a larger and larger role in Bozeman Green Build's projects. In 2011, inspired by the design and engineering challenges these presented, John and his team decided to focus exclusively on renewable energy. BGB, Bozeman Green Build, has installed hundreds of residential and commercial solar PV systems across Montana and Wyoming. John has 5 kids and 2 grandkids who help him raise organic cows and chickens outside of Belgrade. John, take it away.
Thanks, Clay. Is my screen up, Branya? Is my video? Okay, got it. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your evening to join us. This is really fantastic. And I just want to start by saying that the amount of work that Branya, Lori, Clay, Scott, Marita, and many others who I haven't even met yet, the amount of work that you guys have put into this is really incredible and commendable. And I thank you for it, as we all do. And I want to also say just right off the bat that I'm truly honored to have this opportunity to work with the community and through this program, through the with Central Montana Resource Council. But we've been working in these communities in this area for a while, and to formally do it in this way is just fantastic. So I'm truly honored, and I thank you for this opportunity. And I want to give a shout out to this whole idea of Solarize campaigns. I think that they're incredible, and they're truly a sort of a grassroots moment, and they're so simple, and at the same time accomplish so much. I mean, essentially, it's neighbors nudging neighbors to take that next step. There's probably, I'm not sure how many folks are in attendance, but let's say there's 100 people in attendance. I'll bet half to 3/4 of you all have thought about solar in the last 5 years, even 10 years. And it just, the stars hadn't quite aligned yet, and everything didn't quite come together. And this sort of campaign is what helps everybody get that little nudge to actually take the step to figure out what the nuts and bolts of these projects really are, how much they really cost, how fast they'll pay for themselves, what is involved, what's the impact on your property, all of the things that take it from being a sort of a dream to a reality. Andrew and Ladd and Lori gave excellent presentations and really a wonderful overview of where the industry is at, where it's going. I would like to focus just a little bit more on some really basic questions that folks ask. It's sort of the sitting at the kitchen table moment that Andrew was talking about. It turns out that the questions that Branya will pull up for me, since I'm not very technologically capable, the questions that she'll pull up are sort of the ones that we always come back to. Can you pull up the residential slide if you have it, Branya? That's the commercial slide, although it works as well. Do you have that one? Sorry about that.
I do. Give me one moment.
Okay, thank you. One thing to just touch on while she's doing that is that Andrew had mentioned panel sizes evolving, and it is just mind-blowing how quickly they're evolving in their capacity. Andrew mentioned 300 to 350 watt panels, which is sort of a standard residential size. Well, we're now at 400 watt panels for residential. And on the commercial side, in a couple of weeks, we're going to start receiving 480 watt panels, which is incredible. Thank you, Branya. Appreciate it. So affordability, that's the big result or the big benefit of these reductions in costs that both Lori and Andrew alluded to, that 10 years ago or so, it could take 25 years for a system to pay for itself, or even longer. And in some cases now, where we have the optimal production because of the tilt of the roof or a ground mount situation, and we're facing due south, everything comes together. We can get to as low as a 10-year payback, which is really great. Andrew mentioned the federal tax credit. I want to reiterate again that it's 26% now. On January 1st, 2023, it'll drop to 22%. Build Back Better actually had a plan to bump it up to 30% for the next 10 years. We'll see if that somehow magically happens, remains to be seen, of course. But it does give us a little bit of incentive to figure out if we're going to be doing systems here during 2022, because there's a little bit more of a savings to be had through the tax credit. The financing piece, just super quick, the DEQ just came out with its latest, greatest interest rate going forward, which is 3.409%. On a 10-year note, the DEQ loan can be used for residential or commercial projects. And then we also have Clearwater Credit Union's product, which is 3.9%. It's on a 15-year term, it's really geared towards residential projects and not commercial projects. But the wonderful thing, and I really want to stress this about both of these products, is that they're homegrown, Montana-based products. Folks, and I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience here or participants have clicked on their screen for some national solar company or finance bank or whatever the iteration is, and it's so great to be able to look to a Montana-owned nonprofit like Clearwater Credit Union or to the state of Montana itself to find the financing for our projects in Montana. So I strongly encourage everybody to avoid the temptation to sign up with those national lenders and to use our Montana lenders instead. Sort of a nuts and bolts question is a pretty obvious one, especially this time of year, is, well, okay, so you come and install a solar system and then it snows. And of course, snow has the same effect of darkness, that it does completely kill production. But the nice thing is that when we think about the impact of snow, we build that in to our PV watts generated production estimate, and that in turn is built into the return on investment spreadsheet that we prepare for every project. So the financial implication of the snow will be there in the financial analysis. Some folks will get out with a very long broom and pull snow off the roof, and that's entirely up to you guys if you decide to do that. But knowing the financial impact of the snow, I think, is the key, and then you can take it from there. But another question is hail and wind. Andrew alluded to a bullet hole in a panel. We have yet to lose a panel to hail, which is really amazing, since we've got systems like on the Billings Library. Those panels are almost flat on the roof, and they've been through a few hailstorms, and we have yet to lose a panel at that on that system. Over 100 panels. That's not to say that the right hailstorm will destroy everything. So it could happen, but the nice part is that folks will have added the system, whether it be a commercial system or a residential system, to their property insurance policy. And in the same way that your roof and siding and windows are protected from hail, so will the solar PV system. Another question, Andrew alluded a little bit to net metering. And then this ties back to the REAP grant as well, that sometimes your property will have several meters. Melissa may speak a little bit to net metering in Northwestern Energy's territory when there are multiple meters. But for REAP grant purposes, it's really important that we have the full picture of the power that's being consumed at your place. A REAP grant meaning a farm or ranch or small business where there are multiple loads with different meters. Fergus Electric will let us go to multiple meters on a property, which is wonderful, and Carson may speak to that as well. Batteries are not needed for the system to work, but they can be integrated into the system. And often folks will look at it two ways. One is emergency backup, and the other is if they have a cabin or a property where the grid is just not feasible to be brought in, where Fergus or Northwestern or one of the other co-ops is just too far away. Then a standalone system is often the solution. So we have all those options at our fingertips. Another question that is sort of speaks to what Andrew was talking about in terms of power and energy is this notion that the solar PV system has to have the ability to power a particular motor or device. And the way to think about it is that the solar PV system is offsetting the power that the utility is providing. The voltage of the inverters is just a little bit higher than the voltage coming in from the utility, so it takes priority, powers your loads first, and then if there's any excess, goes out through the net meter. But you don't have to worry about the inverter itself being able to power a welder or a well pump or an irrigation pump for that matter, because the amperage required for that will come from the utility, and the PV system will offset that power. And then last, circling back again to what everybody else has stressed, is that it's really easy to get started, and the site assessment process, evaluating loads, deciding where things should be placed, which roofs, ground mount possibilities, all that is pretty quick and easy, and all starts with a power bill, since we need to be able to assess how much power you need to get to net zero, which again, we don't need to get to net zero. That's not a requirement. It's just sort of a great place to start, and from which we can work backwards in terms of sizing the system. So I think the big takeaway for me here, or what I would like you folks to take away from this, is that it's a simple process, and our end of it is to make sure that you've got good information. And once you've got good information, you can make an informed decision about whether this makes sense. It may very well be that we do many site assessments, and a large percentage of folks decide that for whatever reason, it just isn't the right time. And that is perfectly fine. I don't want anybody to feel like they're in any way obligated to do anything. The goal is to get the information into your hands and have you take it from there. And I guess that's a wrap for me. Thanks so much again, and I look forward to working with you guys.
Thank you, John. It's pretty evident that we're in pretty good hands with Bozeman Green Build, aren't we? So looking forward to working with you, John. And
I
your-
appreciate it.
Now, the utilities are obviously an integral part of this whole operation. So first we'll hear from Carson Sweeney. Carson is a Lewistown native, is the general manager of Fergus Electric Cooperative in Lewistown. Prior to working for Fergus Electric, Carson worked for Northwestern Energy as the manager of distribution operations control in Butte, Montana. Carson is married to his wife, Jamie, a registered nurse with the emergency room department of the Central Montana Medical Center. Carson and Jamie have 3 children. Carson, you're up.
Thank you, Clay. And good evening, everyone. I'm Carson Sweeney, General Manager of Fergus Electric Cooperative here in Lewistown, Montana. Fergus Electric serves approximately 4,000 members across 14 counties throughout 4,000 miles of line. I noticed a number of our members are present tonight. Thank you for joining. Before I get into the specifics of Fergus Electric's net metered rate and application process, I wanted to provide some basic electric utility information to help our members have a better understanding of the electric grid in general. John, thank you for your information. You provided some great answers to questions that we receive often. The electric energy generated for the grid is immediately being consumed. Because the electrical energy on the grid is not stored, all the energy generated from a solar array is immediately being consumed across the lines. Net metering is just a practical way of monitoring when energy is being pushed onto the utility system, as well as when energy is being pulled from the utility system. When renewable energy generators are pushing energy onto the system, we measure that amount and credit the member. And when renewable energy generators are not producing and the customer is pulling electrical energy off the system, we measure that energy and either debit from the member's earned bank or we charge them our retail rate. Fergus Electric currently has 39 members who participate in our net metering program. I counted at least 5 of them are on tonight's call. Those 39 systems have a peak generation potential of around 420 kW. In 2021, 17 of our net metered members generated more kilowatt hours in the time period from April 1st to March 31st than they consumed. We allow our members to bank excess generation in the form of credits, kilowatt hour credits, as I said, from April 1st to March 31st. On April 1st of each year, we zero any leftover excess credits, and those are forfeited to the cooperative. However, the cooperative donates the value of those excess credits to Energy Share Montana. We then provide a letter to each of our members that had over generation that they forfeited, and we provide them detailed information so that they are able to have the discussion with their tax professional on whether this donation qualifies as a tax benefit. I am one of the 39 net metered members. I own a 17 kW roof mounted solar array on the roof of our shop. It was producing today. I am a supporter of renewable energy generation in Montana's growing renewable energy economy. With that, I'm also responsible for managing the operations and long-term financial stability of our nonprofit member-owned cooperative. Fergus Electric's net meter policy and rates are not guaranteed and are subject to change over time as determined by our board of directors. For those that are interested in our net metered application process, please call in to Fergus Electric and ask for our engineering department. And we have 3 on-staff engineers. Any one of them is qualified to work with you through the process. They'll provide you information and an application to start that process. Our application fee is $100. And the engineer, if it's an existing electric load, you're a member that has history with us, we can also provide historical electric usage to help John's team correctly size the renewable system for you. We have a generation cap of 25 kW per meter. We have one member who has multiple systems, solar production generation facilities, just one behind a meter, one at a time. Once the solar array is installed, we require an additional $350 payment for our engineering review, inspection, and installation of the net meter. So the total upfront cost from Fergus Electric is $450. Our current monthly base charge for net meters is $40.50. Like I said, we allow members to bank over generated energy. That bank is zeroed out April 1st of each year. The objective of our net meter policy is to not adversely impact other members economically. So we are looking into our net meter rate on an annual basis and making sure that it is cost neutral across our board. With our new metering system, I'm diving into those details right now, doing that rate review for 2021. John mentioned that he wants to rightly size the solar array. John, I like oversized systems. As I mentioned, mine's a 17 kW. The cooperative benefits when the solar array is over generating. We're purchasing less energy from our power provider and donating back to the cooperative provides benefits to all of our membership. So I like to promote oversizing it. If you would like a bigger system up to 25 kW, please do that, and we will work with you to help you receive a tax benefit on anything that's over generated. So let's see. I guess I would end with, outside of net metering, Fergus Electric owns 2 community solar generation facilities. We have a ground mounted array that's 105 kW. And we have a roof mounted array that's 72 kW. We sell individual panels to our members. And on our roof mounted array, which is our phase 2 community solar, we still have about 40 panels left for sale. So if anyone's interested, or you have any family members that are interested, please let us know, have them call the co-op, and we'll take care of that for them. And with that wraps up my session for Fergus Electric, and I believe we'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Carson. Great presentation, great information for our rural members that are on board tonight. Now I'd like to introduce Autumn and Melissa. Autumn Mueller is the supervisor of generation and transmission interconnections for Northwestern Energy. She lives in Butte, Montana. She has worked for Northwestern Energy, formerly Montana Power Company, that takes us back, doesn't it, for 25 years, 12 of which have been in her current role. Autumn's husband, Kevin, is a highway design supervisor for the Montana Department of Transportation. Autumn has 2 daughters, Allie, a freshman at MSU, go Bobcats, and Natalie, a sophomore at Butte High School. Melissa Masters is the G&T interconnection specialist for Northwestern Energy. She also lives in Butte and has worked for Northwestern Energy for 21 years. She started in the call center and then worked in billing and meter reading for 13 years and has been in her current position for almost 2 years. Melissa will get us started.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Tonight, I am going to talk about Northwestern Energy's small generation interconnection procedures. This procedure allows customers to add generation behind their meter up to 50 kW and for those systems to be net metered. This process is a level 1 interconnection under the Rule 17 filed with the Montana Public Service Commission. Our process changed in October of 2019. Before this process change, we didn't have a way to model systems being interconnected into our grid to check the reliability of our system once these systems were added. So October of 2019, the Public Service Commission worked with Northwestern Energy to develop this new process. It is now a pre-approval process. So I guess, first of all, I'm going to start, what we do, we go by premise. So kind of our premise definition that Northwestern Energy uses is the customer's premise is a service address that is identified in Northwestern Energy's billing system. Customers are allowed to have up to 50 kW AC for each classification of service on or per premise. So if they had a general service meter and a residential meter, that customer is allowed to have a 50 kW system per meter. Excuse me. With our interconnection process, there is a $200 application fee. These applications, and Autumn was going to put our website down here for you in our in the chat there. That application process can be found on our website. Again, these applications need to be submitted before systems are installed. A lot of times, and as John knows, we work with John a lot, these applications can be filled out by the installer or a customer, but they are something that need to be submitted to Northwestern Energy before a system is ever installed. We run these applications through a series of screenings. Basically, what we're looking at is to make sure that installation of your system onto Northwestern Energy's grid is not going to compromise the reliability to other customers. So we look at several different things to make sure that all the safety measures are there, and that there's not going to be any reliability issues. Once we go through this screening process, we do get an interconnection agreement out for you, which needs to be signed and sent back. And a fully executed agreement does need to be on file before installation of your project can start. Once a system is completely installed, all the permitting information, all of that is something that you work out between you and your installer to get. But these systems need to be inspected through either your state or county, city permitting office, wherever you received your electrical permit. And once it is inspected by the permitting office and has passed all final inspections, then Northwestern Energy requests a net meter for you to be changed out. So we actually do change out your meter and put a net meter on there for you. These net meters allow for bi-directional usage. Your meter will run forwards or backwards if you're overproducing or pulling energy off of the grid. Once an agreement is sent, once we receive an application to the time that you can start installation, we usually run about 2 to 3 weeks. We can get these fully executed agreements out. Sometimes it's a little bit longer depending on the situation. We do get a lot of new construction requests that sometimes take a little bit longer to process because we need to get more information that we might not currently have yet. But in general, it's usually about a 2 to 3 week process. And then once the net meter is requested, we do try to get net meters set for customers within about 20 business days. So one other thing I want to mention is you guys may have heard of the new smart metering system that Northwestern Energy is implementing. We are working through the state of Montana to install AMI net meters, or excuse me, AMI smart meters throughout the state. And once these smart meters are installed, if you get a net meter, we won't have to physically go out and change that meter out. We will be able to remotely program those meters to be net metering. So eventually it's a several year process for these smart meters. It is taking, I think, through 2024, if I understand correctly, before the state of Montana will have smart meters throughout. But eventually we'll get to the point where we won't have to physically go out and change out the meter. We will be able to program all of these remotely. Northwestern Energy does allow customers to bank their excess usage for 12 months. We allow customers to select a settle up month. Once a year, we do clear out any excess, anything that you haven't used throughout the year, you do forfeit over to Northwestern Energy, that excess usage. But you can choose your settle up month. You can choose between January, April, July, or October. So whatever month works best for you, you're able to choose between those 4 months. Again, our systems, we allow up to 50 kW per system. And just kind of to let you know kind of what we have for net metering. We currently have 3,653 net metering customers throughout Northwestern Energy. And our net metering system, or those net metering systems, are a total of about almost 27,000 kW, 26,694 kW for our net metering customers. Once our system switched over, or our process switched over, the first year we had an additional 394 customers in 2020. And this past year in 2021, we had 578 new customers, new net metering customers. So our growth, we see increased growth every year. This year, we're on track to probably beat that 578 again this year, because like I said, every year this net metering is becoming more and more popular. So I think that is all that we have. Autumn was going to share, she was going to share our website.
Yep,
she'll have
it's
that
out
down
in the
chat.
comments. If you go out and look in the chat, I did post a link to Northwestern's website, so you can click there, and then you can see all of our applications, all of our rules, all of our procedures and processes. It's pretty straightforward. And then Melissa is our direct point of contact for all new requests. So all of our installers are very familiar with Melissa. They work with her day in and day out. All of our customers also can reach out to her if you have any questions, need any additional information about the process or how things work. But like Melissa said, it's a pretty straightforward process. Previously, we did not have this pre-approval process, and so we worked with the commission, developed the process, and now it's pretty fine-tuned, where, like she said, it's about 2 to 3 weeks once you submit your application until you get the go-ahead to start working with your installer to get your system installed.
My phone number, my contact information will be on our website also. Again, if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me. I'm able to answer any questions that you or your installer may not be able to answer. And yeah, if we'll have questions at the end, if you guys have any other questions for me.
Okay. Thank you very much, Melissa and Autumn. And thank you to all our speakers. My name is Marita Valencia, and I'm going to be moderating our question and answer session. Well, I'm going to start with some questions that have been submitted, but there will also be time for you to just raise your hand. And you can raise your hand either by going like this, or you can go down on your screen to the button that says reactions. And there you can choose to raise your little yellow hand. So I'm just going to go to the top of the chat and start with the questions that have come in. The first one is, does a ground mount cost more than a roof mount? And speakers, I think I'll let you self-select for who would like to answer the questions. That one may be for John. But you guys go ahead.
Can you repeat that just to make sure that I?
Does a ground mount cost more than a roof mount?
Okay, and I'm happy to answer that. Yes, it does, because of the trenching, steel, concrete, everything that goes into the racking system is more expensive. But the neat thing about ground mount versus roof mount is that often the overall cost, so the payback time is a wash. Because with a ground mount, you get the optimal tilt angle, which is about 38 degrees, and you can point the system due south. So those two factors mean that you're getting the absolute maximum production out of the system, which often you can't out of a shop roof or a home or a residential roof. So it's a trade-off, but usually in terms of the payback time, they come about the same.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, how many years can the federal tax credit be spread across? And that may be Leia. No, well, you guys self-select.
I can probably jump in on that one. I was actually researching that as the presenters were going. So it's 20 years. So you can roll it over for a total of 20 years. And that's according to a document I found from the Department of Energy clarifying some of the tax credit stuff. So you've got a little bit of time to roll it over if you need to.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to call on Andrea Payne. You submitted a question about hybrid systems, but could you expound on that just a little bit?
Oh, well, you talked about you build an off-grid, or you can build a hybrid that takes batteries. Can you build the grid tie and design it so that you can move right into a self-storing system?
Should I take that? I'm happy to. Yeah, so just stepping back for a minute. So there's three kinds of systems. There's the grid tie system, which has no batteries. And then there's a hybrid system, which allows you to have battery backup when the grid goes down. And usually you size that for a day or two of autonomy, we call it. And then the third type is a standalone system where the grid just isn't there because it's too far away, usually is usually the reason. So there's grid tie, hybrid, which gives you the ability to feed back through the net meter and get your credits and get your financial benefit, while also having the emergency backup. And then there's standalone for a remote cabin somewhere that doesn't have Fergus or Northwestern available. Is that what you were asking?
No, actually, I was thinking, okay, I want the grid tie, but in the future here, I want to get rid of everybody. So
okay,
can I do the grid tie and move right in with minimal cost, or build it so that I can just plug and play?
Absolutely. The hybrid inverter allows you to do that. So the hybrid inverter will work both ways. It can also work as a grid tie inverter without storage, without batteries, or it can work as a standalone inverter, or it can do both. So if you start by installing a hybrid inverter system, then you have all of those options. On the plus side, you have the options. On the negative side, it's all of the battery related equipment is more expensive. But we can analyze all of that and get down to the details, and then you can make an informed decision.
Great, thanks. And here's a question. I'm going to call on Lori. Laura, would you like to ask the question about the multiple meters stacked behind each other?
Sure, that was something that I caught that Carson said, and I think it's, I don't have multiple meters, but I think there are a lot of people out in the country that do. And I don't know if Carson, you can just expand on that. I think you mentioned there was one customer who had multiple meters that were stacked or something. I didn't know what that meant.
A lot of our members have multiple meters. Their ranches, they have stock wells spread throughout, they have irrigation meters just all throughout their property. So we allow one system behind 1 meter. So if you theoretically had 5 meters, you could have 5 systems. Does that answer your question?
You're muted, Lori.
Go. I think so. So in other words, if I had 5 big areas where there was power being used, I would need 5 meters. Is that correct?
It is likely that you already have those meters.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so those meters are already in use. They're powering barns or irrigation or stock wells or corrals or houses or whatever. And we allow 25 kW net meter system behind a meter.
Oh, each one? Did you say
Each
or
one.
combined? Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Yep.
This is probably a question that, you know, a rancher would be more interested in finding out the information. I just have heard the question asked, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
And I think Northwestern's is going to be similar, like if a person had a house and then had a garage, they're different service types. So the house could have a system up to 50 kW. The garage could also have a separate system up to 50 kW. So ours is, the way that we look at it is tied to service type. So kind of similar. But just one system per service type is kind of how we handle it here.
Thanks. Okay, next question is, are there grants or incentives for government entities, like the Fergus County Sheriff's Office and Detention Center as an example?
I'm happy to speak to that. Nonprofits and government entities and churches are all, and co-ops, Fergus Electric, for example, are all eligible for something, or actually take the co-ops off of there. They're with LAD's department, the REAP grant. But the other ones, the nonprofits and government entities, are all eligible for something called a Universal Systems Benefit Fund grant, or a USB grant, which is administered by Northwestern Energy. Sadly, Sean Frederickson wasn't on this call. He's the person who runs that committee and that effort. But it's a great program, and I strongly encourage any folks who are with any of those government entities, the facilities director for Fergus County, for example, the schools in the area, anyone who has some sort of responsibility there, to look into applying for that grant. It's very easy to do, very simple, and it can bring some money in that will offset the cost of a system. Deadline's May 1st.
Thanks. Okay, let's see. This is a long one. Okay. What is the general price per kilowatt hour difference between battery, hybrid, and grid-tied systems? For example, if a 17 kilowatt grid-tied system might cost X dollars, and a 17 kilowatt battery system might cost around 2.5 times that?
I guess I'll answer that. Yeah, it's all over the board. And it really comes back to what you're trying to accomplish. If you are trying to have just a very minimal emergency backup system that's going to get you by for 24 hours with very limited loads, emergency loads, then the increase in the cost of the system to do batteries may be 50%. But if you want 2 or 3 days of autonomy and lithium ion batteries as opposed to lead-based batteries, for example, the increase can be as much as 100 to 150%.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. What are the deadlines for the REAP grant for business and ranchers?
All right, I get to jump in here. So we have two deadlines per year. One is October 31st, or the business day that October 31st would fall on. And then the other one is March 31st. But I would more focus on the deadline being when you're ready, right? I think don't let a government deadline determine when you're going to submit and put your system together. And the reason why I say that is, it's a grant program, so we have to kind of at some point during the year, during some time period, we have to collect all the ones that are interested and have applied and make awards based on that. But one of the flexibilities that we have with our program is that once you've applied to us, you can proceed with your project on whatever schedule works best for you and your installer, right? And so you may, as a business owner, you might want to reserve the right to make that financial decision based on whether you're going to get the grant or not. And I appreciate that. And so you might want to wait for that deadline. And it means more to you. But if you're going to go forward with your business owner and you're going to make this investment regardless of the grant, then turn in your application before you make that investment, and then let it ride, and then see how it goes during the next competition. So it's really flexible in that regard. You don't have to wait for an award, but you might want it.
Okay, thanks. See, I'm going to call on Edward Daigle to ask your question about being underbuilt. Edward Daigle?
Yep. No, I was just curious on how they rated my system, because when they installed it, they told me that they were going to do it with 8,500 kilowatts, 85, yeah, per year. So if I use 1,300 a month, what would that rating be at? And why would they only give me 8,500 per year? Does that make sense?
Who wants to take that one? Lori, maybe Lori. or I can, or Carson, you may have an opinion on this. I'm not sure. I don't want to answer all the questions, but okay. So I think it all comes down to doing a good match of what your load is to what your particular, whether it's a ground mount or a roof mount, can produce. And as Andrew mentioned, PV Watts, the PV Watts calculator, which is run by the National Renewable Energy Lab, that calculator takes in the data of tilt angle and azimuth, and also your geographical location, and crunches it and spits out an AC kilowatt hour number. And if the inputs are correct, tilt angle, azimuth, your geographical location, then we found that it's a very accurate tool. And truly, without that tool, there would be no solar industry. That tool, that one tool, makes all of this possible because it allows us to accurately estimate how much a system is going to produce. It sounds like in your case that there may have been a mistake made when that step in the process was happening, unfortunately. But the good news is you can add to your system to get to the point where you're offsetting 1,300 kilowatt hours a month.
Okay, because I know when they put it in, they gave it a 20-degree angle, and my latitude is at 30. So for my best performance, shouldn't it be at 30 degrees?
Well, not necessarily, and it depends on the weather depends on the weather patterns where you are. And that's why PV watts is so important, because it's looking at the weather data, which ties directly back to how much irradiance you'll have. So for us in the Lewistown area, it's going to be 38 degrees, maybe 37, maybe 39, depending on exactly where we are, if we're a little bit north or south. But 38 is going to be pretty darn close to the best tilt angle, not 45 or 46, which is what we are in Lewistown. And that's all driven by weather data.
Okay. The way it's set up right now, I'm using more power than what it's producing.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Okay.
John, if I can add, in our experience, the different solar installers are remarkably accurate in their estimated generation on an annual basis. For our community solar arrays, they are right on the money. Similar to some of our net metered customers, the tools that you guys use for that analysis is remarkable.
Thanks to the Department of Energy.
Thanks. The next question is for Northwestern Energy, and it's about the possibility of you raising the maximum size that can be allowed. This questioner says that they're at the maximum, but it only provides about 40% of their energy. And what are the chances that that limit could be increased?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything recently about any changes. I know a couple years back, there was a proposal that was made, because this is under, it's not just a Northwestern policy, it's actually something that's in law. And so there was a proposal made maybe 2-3 years back to try to raise it, and it didn't pass at that time. So I haven't heard anything else more recently. Northwestern just basically adheres to the current law as far as the limit.
Mm-hmm. So David Oyen, do you have any follow-up to your question?
No, not really. Thanks for asking. And we would welcome the opportunity, put it that way, to increase our PV installation, which was done by Bozeman Greenfield, actually. Thank you, John. Great job with that.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. So anyway, I think and we certainly would not be the only, commercial installation in Montana who would actually, exceed to a greater or lesser degree the 50 kilowatt limit. We'd welcome the opportunity to, not only cover our own power, but to, contribute to the grid as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah. So how do we make that happen? How does the Central Montana affiliate and the new affiliate in Great Falls, of MPRC, kind of help make that happen? I think it'd be it's a great opportunity for Montana if we could raise that limit.
Yeah, well, we'll put it on our list.
Hey, Marita, if I could just jump in with a quick comment there. David, love to connect with you about that too. In particular, MREA has made that a legislative priority for the last, I think, 4 or 5 sessions, and we've brought a bill numerous times to try and get it increased. So I can talk to you more about the history of the efforts there and maybe what we can do next time.
Super, appreciate that. I'd welcome the opportunity to help.
Okay. How much maintenance is required in a typical net metering system?
Not much. What I usually explain to folks is that the things that we need to watch out for are the possibility of the conductors that are up underneath the panels coming loose if they hadn't been clipped in well properly, because we don't want them to rub on the roof, for example, and it's also a code violation. So we'll come back and do an inspection to make sure that everything is correct within that first year after the installation. And then the other one is soiling. And if you live in a particular dusty area, maybe you have a lot of cottonwoods, but you're also on a dirt road that gets a lot of traffic. It's possible for there to be an accumulation of dust that just isn't washing off with every rainfall. And in that case, it's good to just do a visual inspection of the array, even just once a year or seasonally after that big, July, August period where you have the most dust. And if there is an accumulation, it's easiest just to point a hose with a little bit of pressure, a little bit of water pressure at the array and spray it off. And that'll usually dislodge any dust that the rainfall hadn't removed.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to do one more submitted question and then see if there are people who've been waiting to raise their hand. And this question is for Fergus Electric. We participate in FEC's community solar projects, both phases. How does that monthly solar credit affect the amount of solar we can install on our own property?
Good question. We just recently had this question from another member. It does not impact that. As you know, phase 1 and phase 2 are credited financially, not in banked kilowatt hours. It is straight off the production of the solar panels, the financial value of that credited to each of the panel owners. So those members could also be net metered members. They would be subjected to the net meter base charge of $40.50 a month. And we would probably have to work with our billing provider to make a few software changes, but it is certainly something that we would make work.
Okay, thanks. So has anyone been waiting to raise their hand?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Peter.
This question is for Carson Sweeney. You mentioned that your monthly fee for the net meter is $40 or approximately $40 a month. Is that in addition to the $32.50 a month we already pay?
Peter, good question. It is not. So the standard base charge, to answer Peter's question more thoroughly, the standard base charge of Fergus Electric of the residential rate is $32.50. And our net meter base charge is an upcharge of $8. So $40.50 is the base charge for our net meters. Good question, Peter. Does that answer your question?
So that would be it. Then there wouldn't be the additional $32.50.
Nope, unless you want me to add that and you can donate it back to me or something.
Sure. We can always do something like that, can't we?
Yep. So yep, it's the base charge is just total $40.50.
Thank you.
Yes,
thanks,
sir.
Bob.
Okay, any other hands?
I have a question, several.
Okay.
It's for the panel. How is three-phase addressed within the net meter program?
Are you asking Fergus Electric or Northwestern Energy?
Both.
Okay, Fergus Electric only has a single-phased net meter rate, and we would be willing to have discussions with three-phase members who are three-phase to work through the details for interconnecting on Fergus's system.
And Northwest, do you have an answer?
We have both. We have single phase customers and three-phase customers. When you fill out the application, there is actually an area on that application that you select if it's single phase or three-phase. And that's part of our screening process that we go through just to make sure that everything that you have there passes our screening and reliability tests. So yeah, we have both of them.
Okay. Could someone explain what three-phase is?
Yeah, I certainly could. So first we'll describe single phase. So single phase on the primary system is 2 wires. There is a hot primary phase for Fergus Electric, it's 7,200 volts. And the second conductor is the neutral. 3-phase typically is when you'll see 4 wires on our poles, 3 separate phases, each at 7,200 volts from phase to ground, and then 12,000 volts phase to phase. And those are typically used for commercial businesses and 3-phase motor loads, irrigation loads.
Thanks.
If that answers your question. From a customer perspective, it's typically 208 3-phase or 480 volt or 240 volt 3-phase, not your common household voltages.
So the question further would be then most irrigation on the Fergus Electric isn't allowed, or there's no program for it to have a net meter interconnect?
Good question. We do not have an official policy on it, and we have one member who does do 3-phase net metering for irrigation load that has been grandfathered in. That's why I mentioned our rate is for single phase, but we welcome the conversation for anybody who would like to consider that. We just haven't had people knocking on my door to create that rate.
Good. The other questions would be towards the panel again. Is the idea that the installer that you have chosen, Greenbuild, is it the only one that's going to be allowed within the Solarize Central Montana program to participate?
Why don't you have Scott Sweeney answer that? If you
Yeah,
would.
Scott Sweeney, could you answer? He's here.
Sorry, I ran away for a minute. Yes, at this point, we would just use Bozeman Greenbuild. We went through the vetting process that Lori had described of sending requests to many installers across the state, and Bozeman Greenbuild submitted, we felt like, the most thorough response to us, and they had good building capacity to get many installations installed should many people decide to put them in. So you certainly could go with another installer, but you'd probably be doing that on your own.
Thanks.
The incentives within the Solarize Central Montana for the actual financing of it, mostly it seems like it's informational and promotional for Bozeman Greenbuild, or am I incorrect?
The financing through the other firms are, no, that's not towards Bozeman Greenbuild. You can do the federal tax grant on your own. You can do the DEQ, the Clearwater loans. Those are all separate.
And they have nothing to do with the requirement to use Bozeman Greenbuild.
No, excuse me, sir. I'd really like to see if there are any other hands raised, because we only have a few minutes left. Are there any other hands that I haven't seen yet?
Well, Marita, can I weigh in for a minute? This is Lori.
Yeah.
And I want to say that Central Montana Resource Council is a conduit for information and providing an opportunity. And we are not benefiting financially in any way from this. And so our role is to provide a situation where people can become educated about solar, work with a vetted installer, and then make their own decisions. So that's kind of the opportunity. As I said earlier, this is something that's being done all over the US, and the goal is to make it easy for people to go solar. So that's kind of my read on that.
Yeah. So are there any other questions from other folks raising their hands? Let me just go over to see all the squares here, see if there's any raised hands. Okay, Laurie, did you have another one? You're muted.
Oh, I wondered if Bud Barta would weigh in on something that I don't think anyone has touched on. And it's the idea of looking at ways to conserve your energy before you size your system. Could you do that, Bud?
Yeah, sure. To me, it makes sense to conserve energy before you produce energy because it's so much cheaper. So you can look at your system like you might, and I've talked to John about this, and he said he does this, but like if you walk into a house and it's got single pane windows and all electric heat, and you try and produce a solar system to produce all that energy to do that, it's going to be very expensive. Whereas if you change your windows and maybe your heating systems with a heat pump, you can cut down the amount of energy you need to produce, and that might be a lot cheaper than putting in a big extensive solar system. So it's a trade-off between conservation and new energy, which is going to save you the most money the fastest.
Thanks. Okay, any other hands raised?
If there's no other questions, I would like to ask one more.
Yeah, could you identify yourself? Because everybody else has their name up and we only have
Richard Leach in Hobson, Montana.
Oh, hi. Okay, thanks. Yeah, and what
Thank
was the
you.
question?
The question being then, is it an option to actually increase your electrical use, heating and or consumptions, and accommodate it through your net meter program so that you can offset your heating and energy usage goals with your solar to compensate for less gas and or other power usages?
Yeah, the
That'd be a
answer to that,
question for John, I believe.
Sure. Yeah, and I think Carson was going to jump in, and probably Melissa too, because it sort of ties back to the limit that we're working under. So with Northwestern, it's 50 kW, and for Carson, it's for Fergus, it's 25. So absolutely, you can design the system so that you are, a lot of folks are buying electric vehicles, for example. So they're designing their system to be able to produce an extra 3,600 to 4,000 kilowatt hours a year, because they know in the near future they're going to be charging an electric vehicle. It's the same principle that if you know you've got additional loads, like you want to take your gas hot water heater and turn it into electric hot water heater, or as Bud was alluding to, installing an electric heat pump, essentially an electric heating source. All of those things can be anticipated as loads that'll increase your current load up to the limit that's allowed by the utility.
Right.
Okay, well, we are almost out of time. I have one more question that I'm going to take out of the chat that came in later, and that is, how long does a typical inverter last?
Sounds like a question for Andrew, if he's still here.
John, I'm surprised you're deferring that one to me. But from what all our solar installer members like John have told me, about probably 15 to 20 years, I think, or 20 to 25, depending on the inverter, of all the things in the system that's going to be the first thing to go, from what I understand, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of how that works. So you may have to replace one of those. And typically that's why, when I mentioned earlier, the systems are warranted for about 20 to 25 years. It's based more on the inverter life than it is the life of the panels and the other equipment involved. There really isn't much other equipment though. It's really, the wiring, the racking, the inverter, and the panels. That's the nice thing about solar is there's no real moving parts and not that much to it. It's a pretty simple generation system, which is nice. So John, how'd I do? You'll have to grade me on my answer.
That was incredible. A+.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. Thanks for answering so many questions, and thanks everybody for asking. And if you have, at the end, if you have still want to sign up and haven't been able to do that, we'll have somebody stay on the line after we end the meeting. So I will go back to Lori.
I think I'm up, actually, Marita. And I just wanted to thank our CMRC staff for pulling this together. A special thanks to Lori Lauer, who contacted all of our speakers and arranged for this whole thing. And a big thank you to Branya down in Billings. Thank you so much for all of your efforts pulling this together. Wow, what a jam-packed evening. Thank you again for your fantastic speakers and our audience for attending our kickoff. As of now, Solarize Central Montana has officially launched. If you haven't yet, you can sign up tonight using the link on screen and in the chat, or email Branya your name, address, phone number, and email. You can also find the links at our Central Montana Resource Council Facebook page. Additionally, a few of us will be staying on for extra couple of minutes if you need any help with signing up on for an assessment online. Now, if all else fails, I'm going to give you my number. I'm glad to work with it, and I have no expertise at all. Don't ask me a technical question, but I can sure help you get to the assessment stage. That's the first part of this, isn't it? So I'm going to give you I'm Clayton, and my phone number is 366-6887. What could be easier than that? 366-6887. If you've tried all the other things and they haven't worked, I'll get you registered for an assessment. Thank you once again.
Is that to me, Clay?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then I just wanted to add a little bit about CMRC. If you're not a member of the Central Montana Resource Council, we invite you to become one. As Clay said, CMRC has 120 members in 5 Central Montana counties. If you believe, as we do, that true prosperity in our community begins with healthy soil, water, and air, we sure could use your support. We believe in looking beyond our fences, listening to each other, working side by side with neighbors to solve the problems we face together. And that's what Central Montana is all about. CMRC is a local, all-volunteer organization in which every voice counts. We want to hear from you. So if that sounds good to you, please become a member. You can sign up at our website or join tonight using the link in the chat. Thanks again to everyone for tuning in to our speakers, and have a wonderful evening. Our kickoff is officially adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.